In today's episode. So, about all these purchase orders. Fine babe, I will use my backup camera. You can't use an accent. So let's get started. So, about all these purchase orders. Okay. So the scene is this: it's 1990, I am in college pursuing a computer science degree. For various personal reasons I am getting burned out and leave during my senior year, and decide to get a job. It's probably worth noting that in many areas then, the demand for computer professionals was so high that a lot of places didn't care if there wasn't a degree, there was a massive shortage of people. So, it didn't take me long to land a job. It was at a factory that made hydraulic equipment. There were about 50 office workers there, mostly engineers, accounting, HR, the dock office, plant management, and the various support staff for those positions. This is where almost all of the computers were. It's probably useful to explain that there was no IT department. At all. I was the only IT person for the whole place. After I started there, it was explained to me that I wouldn't be getting a computer. WTF? The reason was this: at the time, it was a status symbol for managers to have a computer on their desks, and most of them never used it. Corporate wanted to encourage the managers to send those computers to their staffs who would actually use them, but they didn't want to lose their symbols. So, you'd have a manager with a computer and 4 or so people under him sharing one PC. Anyway, as there was no IT department, they put me in the accounting department, for lack of anywhere else. Now, while we weren't allowed to purchase new computers, we were allowed to repair broken ones, and that was part of my job. Failed hard or floppy drive or monitor or power supply or whatever. When I needed a part, I'd grab the latest issue of Computer Shopper. Tech people of my generation know it well, but for those who don't, it was basically a big magazine with ads for computers and computer parts. And it was enormous. Hundreds of pages every issue. So one day I am in my office. Yes, I had an office with a desk, phone, door I could close. Just no computer, and the payroll clerk walks in. We will call her Claudia. Claudia points to the magazine and asks if that's where I order the parts from. I said yes. She then asks if it would be possible to build a functioning computer from the various parts. I said sure, that's not a big deal. She then asks if any of the components cost more than $250. That immediately got my attention because of the company's purchase order policy. Basically, every manager had the power to authorize any single PO up to $250. Anything more had to go to the plant manager. I sensed she was up to something, but I answered honestly. No, none of them do. She asked me if I could make up a list for her of the parts that would be needed. Maybe she was cooking something up with our boss? Anyway, I said sure, and that afternoon I presented her with the list she was asking for, grouped so that no single purchase cost more than $250. The next day, the accounting manager calls me into his office. He has a stack of paper, and says he needs to talk to me about them. I have no idea what he's talking about. I take a look. They are all POs. For the equipment I spec'd out. With my name as the requester. Claudia didn't put her name on it, she put mine on them, and didn't tell me. The boss says, "What is all this about?" So, look. If you're still reading this, if you take nothing more away from this story, remember this: never, ever, ever throw the payroll clerk under the bus. I successfully make my wisdom check and lean full into this fiction. I thought it would be a good idea to have some spare parts on hand in case of a failure, so that I can fix it in hours instead of days. The boss looks at the paperwork. Motherboard, case, power supply, memory, monitor, hard drive, floppy drive. That's a lot of stuff. I tell him that if I have a wide selection of parts, I'll be ready for any eventuality. He says it seems to me that you could actually construct a new computer out of all of this. I say. That's a really good idea. If I do that, I can verify that every part is functional before I need to use it in a repair. He scribbles something on the top PO and hands the stack back to me. I won't be approving this. You can go. I walk out of his office wondering if I got in trouble, until I glance at the stack. What he had scribbled was "Nice try, Claudia." He was never fooled. Dropped the stack off on her desk as I went back to mine. A few months later I got a better job at a place that decided its IT staff would be able to do a better job if they had access to a computer. Fine babe, I will use my backup camera. I admit that this happened some years ago. But my wife finally admitted it. So here I am. I'm military and came onto orders to move from New York to Colorado. And right before our move, we traded in my old Pathfinder for a brand new Nissan Altima. And the wife convinced me to spend an extra $6,000 for the NAV, touchscreen and camera. We had a blast on our road trip. But tragedy struck on the last day, when we were in Kansas. After stopping in Topeka, the next morning we walk out and load up the car. I was parked at the end of a row, and there was a car to my left, perpendicular to me. If you can picture that. But I start the car, throw it into reverse, check my mirrors, and I hear we paid $6,000 for this NAV and screen, and you don't even use it. Fine. So I turn my attention to the screen and I don't look away. I reverse and turn. The camera is supposed to beep for both motion and proximity. But nothing happened. I creamed a Mercedes that was in the perpendicular spot to my left. I mean, creamed it. I had a small scratch, this dude had like no bumper left. I check my mirror, instinctively at this point, and guess what was there? The F*King car. I would have seen it if I'd been using the mirrors from the start. But no. So after a few I swallowed my pride, and went into the hotel lobby where I found the dude. He was actually the manager. And I tore the bumper off of his dad's car that he wasn't supposed to have. And I know this because about 15 minutes later, the dad shows up to chew his son's ass out. But we finally exchanged information and USAA totally handled everything for me, and we made it to CO in almost one piece. So prior to this day, she denied ever telling me that. But we were in a friendly conversation today, and something came up about her friend doing almost the exact same thing, and I brought it up again. She laughed and said, "Yeah, I remember that, my bad." Girls, let the man use his mirrors. And guys, I did it. I finally did it. King 11. This was for all of you. Thanks for sharing this with me. Look, I know it's my fault for driving, but her comment came at me in such a judgmental way that my only response was to watch the camera to the most extreme. So take that as you will. You can't use an accent. Reading through the responses on my post from yesterday, I was reminded of another instance of MC from my days at Ticket Nation. After you have taken a couple hundred calls, a week or two of work really, it can get boring, and boredom leads to finding ways to entertain yourself. One of my coworkers decided that he was going to entertain himself by putting on an accent to see how the customers reacted. While I admit he chose poorly, he decided to imitate an Indian accent and started taking calls. He was loving it. After a call or two, however, his team lead overheard him and asked what he was doing and told him to stop. The next day an email was sent out forbidding us from using anything other than our natural accents while we were on the phone. Now, I was living in South Texas at the time, and have a fairly average American accent with a bit of Texan mixed in, but I have family in East Texas and Central and Northeast Arkansas, and when I was little I spoke like them, and so I had an idea. The next day, my opening went from, "Thank you for calling Ticket Nation customer service, this is Astralegium, how may I help you today," to, "Thank you fair Callan Ticket Nashun customer service. Is Astralegium, how can I help you today?" Needless to say, I was quickly noticed and pulled off the phones by my team lead. He asked me if I had read the email, which I confirmed, and then he went on to ask why, if I had read the email, I was using an accent. The look of utter confusion on his face when I told him I'm not was priceless. After a bit of back and forth, I told him that I was raised speaking like I had been on those calls, and that the accent that they were used to hearing me take calls in was, in fact, not my natural accent, and since I didn't want to get written up, I had complied by reverting to the one that was. He wasn't sure how to respond at first, and even went to speak with a manager above him, but kept me off the phones while he figured out how they wanted to proceed. A few minutes later they came back and told me that they wanted me to go back to my professional accent, but I told them that it would be setting a bad example to the rest of the team since we don't want anyone using an accent that isn't their natural accent either. They were stumped on how to proceed, and sent me back to the phones. I continued to take calls with my natural accent after that, and a few of my peers started noticing, and a few of them even joined in by abandoning their Americanized accents in favor of their native Mexican accents. It was glorious. In the end, management decided to roll back the rule and only asked us to keep in one accent throughout the call, and not to use an accent that is derogatory demeaning. I went back to my normal accent and my teammate went back to using a different accent on each call. Thinking back on it, I should have invited him to my D&D group. He would have made a great dungeon master. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.